Hey, folks, welcome back to the show. We have a great episode for you today. We're going to talk about neurotransmitters, the brain. But before we do that, I want to thank you so much for being here in the first place and to ask you for a favor. If you feel inspired by this episode, in addition to sharing it out with your friends and your networks, I would love to invite you to leave a review on whatever platform you're listening to it on, because this is how we get to reach more people, get more amazing guests for you, and the whole nine yards. In other words, this is how we serve you better. Anything else you want to know about me or the programs or my membership community, go to natnidham.com, and you can also sign up for the newsletter there. Have you ever wondered why Gaba, a neurotransmitter that is vital for regulating feelings, emotions, thoughts, and experiences, is often overlooked in the world of neuroscience? I mean, it's always about dopamine, serotonin, but what about Gaba? In this episode of the Biohacking Superhuman Performance podcast, I pondered this question with Dr. Scott Sherr, a repeat guest and a good friend, who unravels the mystery surrounding GABA's key role in our mental well-being. We venture into the complex labyrinth of the GABA system, elucidating its significance in controlling the firing of neurons, its connection to a leaky blood-brain barrier, and the implications for those of us entrenched in the hustle and bustle of life. I'm sure none of you fall into that category, right? Dr. Sherr and I also put under the microscope the intriguing world of supplements and drugs. We peel back the layers on how they interact with the GABA system and the potential mental health risks they harbor. From the influence of alcohol, Xanax, barbiturates, and sleep drugs on the GABA system to natural alternatives, we left no stone unturned. This was a great conversation. Moreover, if you're on SSRIs, you might find our explorations on supporting the GABA system and rebalancing emotions, thoughts, and feelings very enlightening. Dr. Scott Sherr, in addition to being a good friend, is a board-certified internal medicine physician certified to practice health optimization medicine and a specialist in hyperbaric oxygen therapy. He's the founder of Home SF, the first home clinic in the United States, and is also the chief operating officer of Health Optimization Medicine and Practice, Home Hope USA. Dr. Scott is also, you might remember this, the COO of Smarter Not Harder, the company behind Troscriptions, a line of buccal troches that I talk about all the time. Now, to get your hands on some of this amazing GABA medicine, visit Troscriptions.com and use code NAT10 to save. Now, this episode comes out on October 24th. The launch of this new product is on October 26th. So in 2 days, they'll be launching the product. And if you're listening to the episode after the launch, you're ready to go. Now, let's jump into the episode. Hey, folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today's guest is a repeat performer. We love him so much, we had to bring him back. Dr. Scott Sherr, welcome back to the show.
Nat, it's always a pleasure. In a new place you got there, I know. So
yes, my new place that is, got the fumes and the shaking and the breaking, but it's all coming together nicely.
Excellent.
So yeah, and you're not in a new place. You're still in your new place, which is not your new place anymore, right?
It's now new old. I live just outside of Boulder, Colorado, with my 4 kids that tend to interrupt podcasts on a regular basis, but they're all in school today. I should be good, except for a barking dog on occasion, probably. So
that's okay. I get that too. I actually interviewed someone the other day who said, actually he may or may not have been attacked by a lightsaber in a previous podcast.
That's certainly possible in my house too.
Yeah. During the pandemic, he said, that my only real casualty was the lightsaber attack during a podcast. So. That's
amazing. I don't have a good story like that, but
I'm like, that's awesome.
That's amazing. I have my kids coming in saying, "Daddy, I love you. How was your day?" And I'm like, "I'm in the middle of a podcast, but hi."
This is great. Okay. Well, actually, this is an interesting time because, kids are, they're so spontaneous and there's no brakes on kids. And today we're going to talk about the brake system in the brain. That was a good segue, Nat.
Love it.
That was your expression earlier. So
I loved it. Yes.
This is the All About GABA podcast. And, when it comes to neurotransmitters, as we were talking about earlier, everybody's all about the serotonin and the dopamine and the all the things. And GABA is like the forgotten child quite often. And it's unfortunate because we need GABA really badly.
We do.
To relax, to take the edge off, to get to sleep, to have quality sleep. And I love that you guys over at Transcriptions have turned your big giant brains and attention over to this area because, I love a couple of your other products, but now we're going to talk about a whole new stream, if you will. But we're going to talk about GABA.
World. Yes.
A whole new world.
Yeah.
So tell us about GABA. What do we need to know?
Well, I think that you made a really great segue there. So well done on this is actually a title of a talk that I gave recently, forgetting to turn off the brakes. And we forget all the time that we have to slow the fuck down, right? We're very, very busy in life. We have all things to do. Our calendars are full, et cetera. And those superstar neurotransmitters get all the press, but 20% of our neurotransmission, which is a huge amount, is GABA. And GABA is a very important neurotransmitter for all parts of our brain. And what it does is prevents the firing of neurons. So it decreases the firing of our brain. And so it ends up being these neurons that GABA is in are all over the brain, but they're also in a place that are called interneurons. Interneurons are these way stations between neurons that help regulate the processing of information, both downwards and upwards. So the upstream information that's coming from our sensory system and the downward processing that's coming from our brain down to the rest of our body. And so this is extremely important in how we regulate our emotions, how we regulate our feelings, how we regulate our interactions with other people, and then how we process our thoughts, how we process our experiences, both in the now and also in the past and the future, et cetera. So without GABA, we are very excitatory because GABA is actually made only in the brain for the most part. There's a small amount that's actually made in the pancreas, interestingly enough, but mostly it's just in the brain, and it's made from an excitatory neurotransmitter called glutamate.
This we know.
Yes. And so, so glutamate is our most prominent excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. So glutamate is what causes the excitatory, the feelings of, basically when you're having like an excitement kind of feeling, and you're feeling like jittery or you're feeling excited, glutate's probably going to be involved, right? And so when glutamate is in the brain, it gets converted into GABA, and it's very interesting balance between your excitatory glutamate and your inhibitory GABA. And so GABA itself is only made in the brain from glutamate. And so we have different types of foods, of course, that have glutamine and glutamate, but you have no real way to get GABA directly into the brain.
Unless, and we talked about this. So this is an interesting point, right? Because it turns out that somebody listening might be saying, liar, I take these GABA supplements and they hit me beautifully, like they knock me out. And you were mentioning that GABA should actually not be able to get into the brain. And if you are that person, you may have something called leaky brain.
Yes. So
you're going to be okay. You're going to be fine, but
it's going to be okay.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
But it's actually diagnostic. And I've talked to a number of colleagues about this in the past as well, recent past, because you will hear stories from patients and friends that they take GABA supplements and they feel really relaxed and it helps them sleep. It helps them with their anxiety, helps them with their depression, with a lot of different kinds of things. And GABA itself is a very large molecule. So because of how large it is, it really shouldn't get through the blood-brain barrier. As most people know, the blood-brain barrier is what protects our brain from various types of infection, from inflammation, from things that really shouldn't get in there and cause brain issues. And GABA supplements, because of the size of them, are not supposed to get through the blood-brain barrier. And there's very little data out there that shows that they could potentially get through. Maybe at very, very, very high doses, but at regular doses that you'll find in most supplements, if GABA is working for you, it could mean, not 100%, but it very much could mean that your blood-brain barrier is not as robust as it should be. And if that's the case, then of course it's a matter of understanding why that may be the case. Now, having a leaky blood-brain barrier can happen from any number of things. One of the most common things that I've seen over the last couple of years has been infection. So people with severe COVID infections, for example, immune system dysregulation, and then their brain barrier, this blood-brain barrier, gets more leaky, and they start getting the resurgence of infections that didn't have any problems. There weren't any issues prior to the COVID infection, but maybe they had when they were kids. So it could be like Epstein-Barr, or like a CMV, or herpes viruses, or mold infections, or even Lyme, that were kind of cordoned off by the immune system. All of a sudden, after these infections, the blood-brain barrier gets leaky, and now you're getting symptomatic in this capacity. And in my other life as a specialist in hyperbaric oxygen therapy, I see this all the time in traumatic brain injury too. If you have a TBI, your brain gets leaky. And then as a result of that, you may have symptoms specifically from the brain injury, but you also may get infections that start growing in the brain that weren't an issue before, or other types of inflammatory processes. And so one diagnostic way of doing this is taking GABA to see if it works. And if it does, it could be a harbinger that your blood-brain barrier isn't working as well as it should, unfortunately.
And so is there a way to fix it? Because I know for the gut, for example, there's a number of tools and supplements, from aloe vera to colostrum to even moving into the peptide world. Like, there are ways we know that seem to be very effective at helping to reseal a leaky gut. How do we heal a leaky brain?
It's the same path for the most part, because oftentimes if you have a leaky brain, you have a leaky gut. They often go together. So right. the way I would do this and think about this is in a very holistic, foundational way, optimizing gut function, optimizing vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, energy production potential, antioxidant reserve, looking at signs of inflammation. And then once you're sort of adding that foundation, thinking about various types of interventions like peptides, like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, other things that can help, improve the blood-brain barrier and that the permeability issues that were happening. But if oftentimes it starts in the gut, actually, Nat. So You're completely right. That's where I would often start in these cases, is starting at the gut, seeing what's happening there, and then kind of taking my evaluation from the gut to the larger area, looking at hormone optimization, because oftentimes if hormones are dysregulated, that's also going to affect the blood-brain barrier and the leakiness of the brain as well. So GABA becomes one of these really interesting molecules to actually check this, which I find, there's very few things that you can find that are diagnostic in some level, but this may be one of those things that you're like, well, do I, especially if you're having brain fog, if you're having fatigue, if you're having concentration issues, it could very much be because you have dysregulated it's so hard to say, blood-brain barrier, BBB for short, triple B.
Yeah.
Just called the triple B. Yeah, something like that. But one way you can, what I think about here is like looking at that foundation and then how you can recreate it by looking at all these various markers along the way. But what we do with GABA here is, GABA is really important for helping the brain calm down. And a lot of these patients, a lot of these people need GABA as well, because their brains are firing at all cylinders, even if they're depressed. Like you and I were talking about just before we started recording that on average, an individual has about 70,000 thoughts per day. Those are not you, ladies and gentlemen.
No wonder I'm so tired at the end of the day.
You are not your thoughts. Remember, you are not your thoughts. Those crazy ass thoughts that everybody has that you have, they're not yours. No. I tell my kids all this all the time too. But if you are depressed, you have 120,000 thoughts on average per day, because you perseverate. You compulsively think about thoughts over and over and over again. And interestingly enough, there's a new drug that was just approved by the FDA here in the United States that is what's called a positive allosteric modulator of the GABA receptor. And I'll explain that in a minute. Yeah. But it's for postpartum depression. And so it's the first drug that's actually affecting the GABA system specifically for depression. The good news is, though, there's so many natural ways to boost GABA and supplements to help you. But to break it down, the GABA receptor itself is really interesting. It's got these 5 different subunits in it. Okay. And GABA is modulated various different ways. And there's what's called an orthosteric ligand, which is basically something that actually affects the GABA receptor site itself. And then you have these what are called allosteric sites. These are sites that are next to the GABA receptor site, but actually modulate the GABA receptor when GABA is around. Okay. So you have, it's called orthosteric ligands and allosteric modulators. And so there's lots of things that affect the GABA receptor already. We know this from any number of opportunities to drink alcohol. That's probably the most common, right? And so when people drink alcohol is a positive allosteric modulator of the GABA receptor, a very strong one. Okay. And so what that does is it binds to the receptor. GABA is around. And what happens when GABA binds to this receptor is it opens, and then it what's called hyperpolarizes the postsynaptic membrane. What all that means is basically it prevents that neuron from firing. So you have 2 neurons. Imagine you have your presynaptic neuron, and you have your postsynaptic. Okay. The postsynaptic neuron has this receptor, the GABA receptor. And what happens is when GABA binds to it, it opens up this channel. It's called an ion channel. And then all this chloride goes through it, not chlorine, chloride.
Oh, chloride, different.
No, different pools and whatever. I'm getting confused but it's Cl. So that's the chemical name. So chloride goes through, and then it hyperpolarizes the membrane so that the postsynaptic neuron can't fire. Okay. And so GABA is attaching and doing that. Or you have these allosteric modulators like alcohol, for example, or barbiturates or benzodiazepines, which are like your Xanax and Ativans and things like that of the world. And when those things bind, GABA is also there. And then you have the hyperpolarization. So you have the prevention of firing of that particular neuron. So you have GABA, that binds to its receptor. And you have things that can also be like GABA that bind to that receptor as well. And then you have these other sites on the GABA receptor itself that can also bind and cause that channel to open when GABA is around.
Right. And so that's why you get kind of dopey. Like you get super relaxed, right?
So you get disinhibition.
The disinhibition. That's the net effect of GABA, is because glutamate, excitatory, wired, crazy.
Right.
GABA, super chill, in a best case scenario kind of thing. And we need to be able to convert. Basically, we need to be able to go back and forth between the two. And when you get your alcohol, your barbiturates, Xanax, all those things, you're no longer able to go back to glutamate. You're kind of stuck in a GABA state, sort of.
Well, the way I would think about it is that you just get an imbalance, right? Yeah. So, and that you get more of an imbalance from glutamate to GABA. So to convert glutamate to GABA, you need vitamin B6 and magnesium, by the way. So if you're B6 deficient, if you're magnesium deficient, and you can test for these things, you're not going to be able to convert your glutamate to GABA. So a good test for people is to have glutamine containing foods, or even better yet, glutamate containing foods, and seeing how irritable you get. And the most common one is MSG. So if you go to a Chinese restaurant, your food is sweeter than usual, you start getting headaches, that is glutamate. As a result, the glutamate is excitatory. You have too much of that built up. It's not being able to convert fast enough from glutamate to GABA. As a result of that, you get more glutamate and you get headaches. Okay. You can also take glutamine-rich foods. So you have meat, cabbage, bone broths, cheeses that are high in glutamine. Glutamine also gets converted to glutamate, and then that gets into the brain. So that takes a little bit longer. So taking glutamine-rich foods hypothetically shouldn't make you irritable. If it does, it also can mean you have some conversion issues either on any of those steps along the way. So, but anyway, so with the conversion to glutamate to GABA is a one-way street. So it doesn't mean that you don't go back. What happens with GABA is that actually GABA gets decarboxylated and goes into the citric acid cycle. And then it goes and makes energy that way. It can help make energy that way. But what happens when you have too much GABA is that this eventually, if you have way too much, it can cause central nervous system depression, right? And then depending on how some of these modulators work, they can bind so tightly that they can cause issues with tolerance and dependence and withdrawal. And that's what happens with things like your Xanaxes of the world and your Ativans and your barbiturates and alcohol. And, it's funny with alcohol though, Nat, and I think that, and this kind of comes down to like a larger picture here, which is like, how many of us in this world are GABA deficient? And the answer is a lot of us. We think about serotonin deficiency and dopamine addiction, but GABA deficiency is a big deal because it's associated with depression. It's associated with anxiety. It's associated with obsessive compulsive disorder. It's actually associated and potentially contributing to things like schizophrenia and mental illness and alcoholism, which makes sense, right? Because if you're an alcoholic, you're constantly looking for that GABA fix because you're always deficient in it. And so why does alcoholism sometimes run in families? You wonder, is this a GABA deficiency that you're just trying to compensate for in some way? And so a lot of practitioners like you and I are focused, and I'll admit, personally that I really wasn't focused on the GABA system until we started actually looking at this as a company and saying, why are so many people, they're looking at their dopamine fasts and they're looking at their serotonin but they're still miserable, right? And they can't sleep. They're still anxious. We know that SSRIs, they do work on some level to help with mood regulation, maybe, but they're not really, but they don't work right away. And the cool thing about GABAergic compounds is they work right away. And that's why it can work so quickly in postpartum depression even, is because, we know that they work very quickly instead of like an SSRI or something like that you're taking that takes 4, 6, 8 weeks to just elevate your mood, but not really antidepress you. That's really what SSRIs typically do. So the cool thing about the GABA system is I think that we're actually looking at it from the ground up here, because I often now see, as I've been, of course, every car is blue if you have a blue car, but I will admit that. But everywhere I look, I see GABA deficiency everywhere.
Well, and nobody's talking about it either, right? So, you just said so many different things here. I've now forgotten all of them that I want to comment on or ask questions about. So the B6 and magnesium, so the magnesium is really interesting, right? Because it gets a lot of attention, and the more, and some, every once in a while you're like, oh, enough with the magnesium already. And yet, here again, we see a place where if you're deficient in magnesium, it could have a material effect. Also explains why magnesium can be so helpful with sleep.
Exactly. So we always think that why is magnesium helpful for sleep, guys and gals? It's because it's helping the conversion of glutamate to GABA. One of the many ways, but that's probably the most prominent way that it works. And so magnesium helps us relax because of that. Magnesium also does some vasodilation itself. So there's some vasodilation that happens with magnesium too. But because of the conversion there, we're going to be turning the brakes on so you can relax, so you can get some rest. And, we know that GABA is extremely important for sleep and for sleep maintenance and for sleep regulation. It helps I talked about earlier how it's an interneuron, right? So it works between your dopamine and your serotonin neurons and your catecholamine containing neurons, your norepinephrine and epinephrine. So it helps regulate all of those when you're sleeping so that you can have REM sleep, but at the same time, you don't wake up. You sleep and you're actually calm during your nightmares or, your crazy things that you're having with lightsabers, but they're in your dreams, but instead of on a podcast or something like that.
Right.
But so it's really important for not only for you helping to fall asleep, but also to maintain your sleep as well throughout your various cycles when you're going to bed. But people forget the simple things, of course, right? And that we need magnesium. We hear that all the time, but why? And this is one of the major reasons. And, when we're looking at, when I do testing in people, I'm always looking at intracellular magnesium levels and not free floating magnesium levels as get as well, Nat. But even then I still will supplement people with magnesium if they're having a hard time sleeping, because you can also look at their amino acid levels. I can look at their glutamine levels, for example. I can look at their catecholamine levels. I can look at and see how everything's kind of working together to either make the system primed to relax or not, unfortunately.
Yeah. And this is why, and even some people will supplement with L-glutamine for any number of reasons. And I've had a few people say to me, oh no, I can't go near that stuff. It drives me nutty.
Yes.
And this is why they're not able
This is
to
why.
convert it.
Yeah.
It just adds fuel to the fire. Actually, probably adds fire to the fire, not even fuel. So why do you think they'd only, seeing as supporting the GABA system is so beneficial for so many people, why just postpartum? Is it just because that's the study they did? Or do you think it's eventually going to expand to other people?
Like it definitely will.
Conditions?
Yeah. And it definitely will. Yeah. I mean, there were some so the interesting thing about the GABA system is that I was talking about the receptor earlier. It's got these 5 subunits, and the subunits differ depending on where they are in the brain. Mm-hmm. And the subunits are correlated with different things. Like some units are correlated with anxiety relief and stress relief. Other ones are correlated with sleep induction and drowsiness. Others are correlated with neuropathic kinds of things and how we relate to how nerve signal firing and inflammation, et cetera. So as a result of that, it's been a little tricky to deal with the GABA system because you have to be very understanding of where that's going to affect the brain. So there were some initial studies that were done on this one particular compound that was taken off the market like about 20 or 30 years ago for schizophrenia. Uh-huh. And what they found is that it made schizophrenia worse. Uh-huh. And the reason for that is where this particular drug was working in the brain and how it was disinhibiting the inhibitor, which basically means it was allowing more firing in a particular area with these schizophrenics that made them actually have worsening symptoms. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you have to be a little bit careful here, but I think what's going to happen with this particular drug, and we already have a lot of supplements, by the way, which we can talk about, that work on the GABA system naturally, and they do not have the same tolerance, withdrawal, and risk profile that alcohol and Xanax and barbiturates and also your sleep drugs, your Ambiens, your Linestas, they're all working on the GABA system. Cannabinoids are also working on them too, which, there's a lot of different things that are working on the GABA system. But I think what's going to happen is that this is going to be the first. What drug companies always want is they always want something that's going to be very easy to figure out a very specific indication for. And then what happens is you get all these off-label uses of the drug, which just basically means it's not, quote unquote, indicated for it, but we're using this particular molecule, this particular compound for regular depression or regular OCD, and so you're going to see that. And we've been developing this over the last 6 months. Our products that have these GABAergic, these both positive allosteric modulators, as well as orthosteric ligands, which is, again, like GABA working in the brain. And we've been working on these for a while, knowing what we know, and then also knowing that these compounds were likely going to be coming out on the market for, the problem always with drugs is that they're going to be stronger most of the time. And they're going to be so singular in their how they work that they're going to be higher risk for things like tolerance, withdrawal, and dependence. And we know this from, I'm sure people, I know I do, and I see people in the hospital still sometimes that are addicted to alcohol, right? And they're addicted to Xanax and to benzos. And if you stop these things cold turkey,
horrible. The benzo, it's like I've seen people, it takes them forever, and it's horrible to get off them.
It is, and it's because these drugs so tightly bind to the GABA receptor that they can cause these things to happen. And what happens if you stop them abruptly is that you can have severe symptoms. You can even die if you're not very, very careful. So I do worry always that that's how drugs are developed to make them so that they're powerful and that they can work, but they also have much higher risk profiles than things that come from the natural world that have millions of years of evolution behind them to show how they can work on these various locations on the GABA receptors in this case, but not cause all of these kinds of terrible things to potentially happen. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes with the right, and natural compounds can be brutal too, but I mean, with the right compound, that's not that overwhelming to the system, if you will. It should allow some ability of the system to modulate and to balance itself within it. Right? Like it's almost like the difference between encouraging something to go a certain way rather than just slamming it in. So that you still allow the system to push back a little bit and to balance itself. So So tell me about, because given that, and I mean, you may or may not be able or willing to answer this question, but given that a lot of people suffering from depression, anxiety, OCD, all these things are taking SSRIs, is it an either or situation, or is it possible to support the GABA system while people are still using their SSRIs, and to see if that additional kind of input helps to rebalance things a bit? Because I mean, my exposure to SSRIs, you speak to a couple of people every once in a while who say, yeah, they're great. And more often than not, I'm speaking to people who they're not hitting the mark. It's a little bit, actually, I'm not going to say what I was going to say, but it's a little bit like certain other things that are pushed out every year that never really quite hit the mark, but yet they still get pushed out.
Yeah, I think my sense is that, with these new GABA compounds that are coming out, that you're going to see less and less SSRIs prescribed over the next couple decades. Mm-hmm. And you're right, they don't really work as billed for most people. They can help some, but the suicidality thing is real. And this happened. I have a friend that had a sister who killed herself after being on an SSRI for 2 weeks in her 20s, because the suicidality piece is huge when you first start one of these SSRIs, especially if you're a younger person. Mm-hmm. So, but you know what they're going to be resold as, Nat, as there's this company that's selling SSRIs to men so that they don't have premature ejaculation. So that's what they're going to be for. Yeah. No, I was so shocked. I get targeted, like everybody else. I'm not saying what I was looking at, everybody, but I got targeted by this ad, and I was like, what are they using for this? And it actually, last 5 times longer in bed, and they prescribe you an SSRI to do it. So that's you won't have any feeling. You won't feel it. But
won't feel anything,
but you'll last.
You'll last a lot longer. So sorry. So they can.
But your question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your question.
They can. So, can they coexist, or is that it depends, which is entirely okay with me? Like,
yes,
I say it all the time.
So the answer is it has to depend, right? Because every situation is going to be a little bit different. What I can say is that they're working on completely different neurotransmitter systems. Mm-hmm. So if you have a GABAergic compound that you're working with, it's not going to affect the serotonin system very much, nor is it going to affect, the norepinephrine system very much. Some of these newer antidepressants have both components of norepinephrine reuptake, inhibition, as well as serotonin, sometimes dopamine as well. So, but the good thing about what we're talking about here is GABA's not really affected by any of the antidepressants that I'm aware of on the market right now. Okay. So the major thing you have to think about when you're taking something that's GABAergic, that's what we call something that increases GABAergic, is that what else are you doing that's also GABAergic, in the sense, are you taking any other compounds or drinking alcohol with them? Like, that's why you never want to combine, alcohol with Xanax. Like, that's like a bad idea, right? Because that's going to increase potential respiratory depression, and that could kill you, right? So that's something that I tell alcoholics all the time, that we give them Ativan, we give them benzodiazepines to get off of alcohol, because it helps with the withdrawal process, and you slowly wean the benzodiazepines over multiple days. But I tell them, if you go back to drinking with this, you may kill yourself, because the combination could do that. So, that's something that, you have to tell people that are doing these things. So you have to be aware of that. But the nice thing about it is that we have all these compounds that work in the GABA system that are very safe, that have been used for centuries, that can be very much helpful for things like your mood and like sleep, and also helping with perseverating thoughts and all these kind of GABA deficiency kinds of things that we were talking about before.
All right. So so I feel like we're circling now. So let's talk about what are those compounds that can help. So basically what you're saying, if we provide the precursors and the cofactors to the brain, then we're going to enable the GABA system to work better, because just physically providing GABA hopefully doesn't work for you. But if it does, it's actually good information.
Right.
But let's just say for people in general, just taking GABA doesn't work. You can't get it there. So what we're going to do is we're going to give the system everything it needs and let it do its thing, and not be pounding glutamine at the same time.
Yes. The first step always, and we've talked about this before on previous podcasts, but the way our company Troscriptions was developed was because we have a nonprofit organization called Health Optimization Medicine and Practice. This is a nonprofit, as I mentioned, that's training doctors and practitioners like Nat and I and others that are looking to optimize health rather than treat disease, looking at foundational biomarkers of cellular metabolism, something called metabolomics, which is looking at real-time measures of how your cells, how your gut, how your brain is working in real time. And so when we developed this company, this education company, we have a 7-module certification for doctors and practitioners, and we have some advanced practice modules as well, and things like cannabis and peptides, Nat's favorite, more advanced than Nat's basic course, which everybody should take, by the way. And so,
my course.
What's that?
Definitely more advanced than my course.
Yeah, well, and like you need the basics. Yes, that's why it's called a crash. Exactly. Yeah. So the nonprofit was developed as a foundational approach to health, optimizing people over the long term, knowing that optimizing health takes a while for people. It's not something that happens overnight. And so, but building up cofactors, building up all the various aspects of supporting your GABA system is part of that process. But that can take time. And so as we were developing this company, Health Optimization Medicine Practice, we knew that we needed to develop another one that could help right now with the various types of things that people need right now as they're optimizing their health and doing the long game and really looking at that long-term health span and longevity at the same time, we hope, right? So as Nat and maybe some of the listeners know, we have multiple products in this world of helping right now. But the one that we came up with in the GABA system was related to everything we've been talking about before. And we looked at various types of supplements that have been really helpful for the GABA system for many, many years. And we actually have a product now that you know about, Trocom, which is a combination of multiple different things, including something called nicotinyl GABA. Nicotinyl GABA is a vitamin B3 attached to a GABA molecule. This allows GABA to get through the blood-brain barrier. That's why we have that particular compound. We know GABA doesn't get through. We know nicotinyl GABA, a vitamin B3 attached to GABA, does. And then
didn't you say GABA was too big?
But when it's attached to a B3, it then becomes permeable as a result of having the B3 attached.
So the B3 makes the blood-brain barrier more permeable, not leaky.
Not leaky. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Because there's receptors for B3, so B3 goes through, so B3 leads the way, kind of thing, right? Nice. And so when B3 and nicotinyl GABA attached get through the blood-brain barrier, then it gets hydrolyzed inside the brain, which means it just gets disattached, or it gets two separate molecules again. And so then B3 helps with mild, B3 obviously is vitamin B3. It helps with NAD production, helps with vasodilation. So Trocom, it gives you that piece. And then it also gives you the GABA piece, because then it becomes GABA itself in the brain. The cool thing about nicotinyl GABA is that it gives you the B3, which is a little bit of activating. At the same time, it gives you the GABA, which is a little bit of inhibition. So you get this sort of balance. So the cool thing about this particular compound is it makes you feel calm, but it doesn't make you feel tired.
Yeah, no, I've used it.
And so that's what's interesting about it. And then in addition to nicotinyl GABA, the next thing we have in there is kava. And everybody knows kava these days, but kava is what's called a positive allosteric modulator of the GABA receptor. And so, shocking, it's going to modulate the GABA system. But interestingly enough, GABA is not the only thing that kava works on. Kava also works on the dopaminergic system, so the dopamine system, and it also works on the norepinephrine system as well, increasing those a little bit at the same time as it's increasing GABA. That's why with kava, you don't typically get terribly tired as well. You get, especially the type of dose you get, like lower doses as well. Like if you're just saying low dose with kava, you might get an activating feeling, but relaxed, like a drink of alcohol, for example. But instead of that sort of, very calm, very sedated kind of feel. And then in Trocom, we also have CBD and CBG. And so cannabinoids, interestingly, have multiple different places they work on the brain. They work on something called the endocannabinoid system, which is our body's internal homeostatic system. It's our internal balancing system. This is a word that I got from a colleague of mine, Ari Whitten. Ari, you probably know. Yeah. He said what the endocannabinoid system really is a homeostatic system. And he's right. I think that's a great way to describe it. And so CBD specifically works on the GABA receptor as well. And it helps calm down firing because it increases GABA as another one of these positive allosteric modulators. And this is why GABA is used for seizures, actually. High dose, CBD is used for seizures.
Right.
CBD at high doses actually modulates the GABA system and can prevent seizures. And so there's a drug called Epidiolex that is available for people that have seizures. And it's just really just high strength CBD to do it. So CBD also has effects on the endocannabinoid system and others, but everything we have in TroCalm is specifically affecting the GABA system in either direct or indirect ways. As a direct being what's called an orthosteric ligand, meaning that nicotinol GABA is actually GABA itself attaching to the GABA receptor, or it's these other molecules, the kava, the CBD and CBG, that are affecting other sites on the GABA receptor, allosteric sites, and modulating the GABA system itself. So this is why TroCalm is so great, because it's not one of those things, it's not one of those compounds or products that makes you feel tired per se.
No.
It makes you feel less anxious, less stressed, and quiets your mind. It was developed that way. But some of us need more than that. Some of us need not only to feel less anxious and less stressed, but also to help us sleep. And so we developed another product called Trozzie,
which is not available yet.
But it might be by the time this podcast comes out or close to it.
That's right.
We're looking at an October release, ladies and gentlemen, sometime at that point, if all goes well. But it'll be out soon regardless. And Trozzie, so TRO and Z, capital Z, then lowercase z, like sleep, was developed for people that have a hard time going to sleep. And the idea with Trozzie was to leverage the GABA system with a couple different molecules, which we'll talk about here, and have you the ability to have you both fall asleep, stay asleep, and then and then wake up feeling rested, as long as you get between 7 hours of sleep or more. The idea with this particular compound that we've developed, Trozzie, is that it requires you to get a certain amount of sleep.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
So there's no cheating on the hours with this one.
Right, because it's because one of the molecules in there that affects the GABA system very, very significantly is called muscimol, and muscimol is what's called a orthosteric ligand of the GABA receptor, which just means that, I know these are fancy words.
You guys are going to be so smart after this podcast.
Yeah,
you're going to know.
But the idea, I want to get the terms out there because this is all new for people, and then we're going to be talking about this a lot. And I think it's going to be, and you're going to be hearing so much more about GABA. We're only like the first company we're always like the first movers with this stuff. And so what's going to happen over the next 3 years is you can hear all this stuff again.
Okay, so muscimol, we're talking about muscimol as an orthosteric ligand.
Yes. And so what that does, so muscimol is a very fun, interesting ingredient that comes from a very colorful mushroom. This mushroom may be the mushroom of Santa Claus lore. It was commonly ingested by shaman in Northern Europe many thousands of years ago because it has psychedelic properties. It is called the Amanita muscaria mushroom. Amanita muscaria mushroom has two different components, major components to them. It has multiple other ones, but one's called ibotenic acid, and the other one is called muscimol. So we've created a particular muscimol itself can come from the mushroom, or it can be synthetically made, and we've made it in a lab. So ibotenic acid in Amanita is what's responsible for the hallucinogenic piece of it, and it's also responsible for the toxicity piece of it as well. Because it's actually kind of crazy. So what actually used to happen is that these shaman in Northern Europe and Scandinavia would drink the urine of a reindeer. Okay.
Oh, really?
That the reindeer would eat this mushroom. They would detoxify it enough that the shaman would then drink the urine of the reindeer.
Who comes up with it? Who thinks of these things?
How could you even figure this out, right?
No.
But I think what they saw is that these reindeers were tripping balls, and then the shaman.
I want what he's had.
Yeah, exactly.
But still,
maybe we can have
want
some.
to eat the mushroom? Yeah.
They couldn't eat the mushroom because it would make them vomit and make them sick, and so then they would drink the reindeer urine, and then what would happen in these ceremonies is that the shaman would then take the reindeer urine, and then people would drink the shaman's urine.
Oh, for God's sake. Come on. That is just brutal.
No, I'm not making any
You literally can't make this up. I mean, you could, but really.
You can make it up, but you can't. But it's like, the Amanita muscaria mushroom has been in folklore, in children's fairy tales and everything for thousands of years, known to have these psychedelic properties, right? And so, but what's interesting about muscimol at very, very low doses that we're using, it's working on the GABA system. It's relaxing the GABA system, and it's causing increase in GABA in the brain. And so it does this directly. It goes directly through the blood-brain barrier. Even if it's not leaky, it goes directly through, and it increases GABA in the system. And it lasts, the half-life though is long. It lasts for about 7 to 8 hours. So that's why
you need to invest.
If you're taking muscimol, if you're taking it, you need to do it at very low doses. At high doses, it can also cause some visual disturbances, but at very, very low doses that we're taking and that we're using in our products, we're talking about less than 1 milligram in our products here. It's very, very safe. It's very well tolerated. And what it does is just calms down the whole GABA system. And so we have something called muscimol in there, which is affecting the GABA system. We have CBN and CBD, which you know already, both affecting the cannabinoid system. We have 5-HTP, which is affecting the serotonin system, because serotonin is very important for sleep as well. We have a little bit of melatonin. I know people get worried about melatonin, but a little bit of melatonin is actually really nice. It helps with sleep induction. And it's really great for people who travel, but melatonin production goes down dramatically after about the age of 40 years old or so. And so most of us have, when we start having declining in melatonin, this is the people that start waking up in the middle of the night at like their 2 or 3 o'clock wake ups, because their melatonin supply goes down. And as a result of that, they wake up and their mind starts racing. So the nice thing about having this on board, along with the other ingredients in the sleep product, is that even if you do wake up, it's usually very easy for you to go back to bed. That's a big issue for a lot of people that wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. They have a hard time with getting back to bed because their mind starts racing. But if you have some GABAergic things in there, you have the muscimol, you have the CBD and CBN, you have a little bit of melatonin helping you support your system. It really does work. I mean, we've been testing this now for a while, and it really does work superbly.
Nice.
But the key with all of this here is that what we think is sort of the holy grail now is affecting the GABA system in a way that's supportive, but in a way that's not going to overclock it, but just given enough, so that you have a little bit of support, but you're taking the crazy drugs that cause all the addiction and tolerance and withdrawal and things like that. So there's one additional ingredient in there that I haven't mentioned. It's called another one that nobody knows about, but it's gotten pretty famous in the last year because there was a show on HBO that was around this mushroom called the cordyceps mushroom, called The Last of Us.
Yes.
On HBO.
I resisted that show for so long, and then I got drawn in, and as I'm watching it, I didn't even know what it was about, and I'm like, that's cordyceps mushroom. That's what cordyceps does. I'm saying this to my husband, and he's looking at me going, what are you talking about? I'm like, it's a mushroom. It does it to the insects. It does it to ants. Now it's just doing it to people. Anyway.
And making them zombies. And So anyway. It's called like the zombie ant. That's why because this mushroom can take over the nervous system of the ant or other very small animals, and then create like a factory to make more of cordyceps, basically. And so, but cordyceps has a very interesting ingredient in it called cordycepin. And cordycepin is a fantastic immunomodulator. It's an anti-diabetic. It's a hypoglycemic. It's being used in cancer studies. It also affects slow wave sleep. And so we've used this particular compound in our Trozzie because it increases slow wave sleep as well. So, but there's a lot of really interesting things that are going to be going on with this particular mushroom going forward, or this compound inside the mushroom that we're using in some new products that are coming out probably in early 2024 as well. So more to be said there, but
other things with cordyceps.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But in the end, what we're looking at here is like a full sort of Mercedes stack
with no reindeer pee involved.
No, unless you want that, maybe we can get some for Christmas. I don't know.
No.
But the whole Christmas mythology is thought to be potentially related to this mushroom. People can actually Google this or search engine, whatever your favorite
reindeer,
is.
Like the whole thing.
The flying reindeer, Santa Claus in a red vest. This is actually the mushroom himself, the mushroom itself, like a person turning into a mushroom that looks like the mushroom, So like it's a whole thing. You can look, the New York Times has done a couple cool video graphics on this over the years, right? So, it's really interesting. Dr. Ted, our founder and chief formulator, he's a mad scientist, and he's the one that found this here. But we're using the muscle mall as we said, not as a psychedelic, but as a way to modulate the GABA system in a very holistic, foundational way. Along with, this doesn't take the place of optimizing your cellular foundation and doing this, but in the end, I think what we need to be thinking about is like how we are truly addressing our GABA system, and then there's a couple other supplements that are not in our product that people can think about, like valerian root is another one. Valerian is great for sleep induction because it affects the GABA system. It's another positive allosteric modulator, basically another site on the GABA molecule, if everybody remembers now. So, and then it increases GABA that way. So valerian, passion flower is another one. Siberian ginseng. There's a couple other ones that are really great at modulating the GABA system.
Yeah.
There are some actually that
sleep remedies, really.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. There are some that antagonize it, that block it. So these are things you want to be careful of as well. So one of the most common ones is actually harmaline, which is in the ayahuasca plant. And so just that's actually inhibiting the inhibitor, so making the GABA system less active. So there's a couple different things. There's a couple drugs that can affect the GABA system, and also so THC actually is interesting. So THC can actually have this initial effect where it causes more anxiety in people, and it causes more stress, and that actually is because of the GABA system as well. Interestingly enough, it's disinhibiting the GABA system in a way that's causing anxiety, in a very special way because of where it's actually affecting the brain. Right. So it's a little bit strange like that. So you have to be a little bit careful on THC specifically. But there's certain drugs.
It's isolated, right? Because if you have THC and CBD, like you have, and this, I guess, is where people start talking about full spectrum products, because now you've got all the other cannabinoids to balance out the THC. And my guess is what you're talking about is where people get into trouble is these products where they're jacking up the THC out of whack with everything else. And so you end up with a disproportionate effect.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why like having a ratio there with some CBD in it tends to be better for most people than just having 100 milligrams of THC in some crazy cookie that somebody will eat tomorrow or today or now or something.
And Santa Clauses. Well, I mean, it's not a Santa Claus thing, but still you might see all kinds of things. No, THC is not for me, man. But I have the gene that gives me a higher risk of THC-induced schizophrenia. That's maybe why I never really liked that one. So. Yeah. Well, and that's an interesting gene. I almost think like that, we've known about that gene for a really long time. And and we know that schizophrenia can kick in early 20s young men disproportionately. And you have to wonder if people were informed and knew, and I don't know if it's always related to this genetic variant, but if it is related to this genetic variant and it puts someone at higher risk, wouldn't you as a parent want to be informed and be able to educate your child to say, look, there's other things you can do, but this one in particular, because I know a couple of people who had brilliant, accomplished, amazing young men, children who became schizophrenic, and the stories are tragic.
Yeah, it's truly tragic. You're right. It's a good question. I mean, I think I don't know what the what's it called? If sort of like the genotype phenotype thing is, I don't know what the penetrance of that gene is and how that truly looks from a population perspective. But you're right. I mean, THC is like, yeah, I know. Yeah. I mean, there are certain things. I mean, we know that young men, especially like you said, have a higher risk. And these are why, things like psychedelics as well. You have to be super careful with family history and understanding some of these potentials, and doing them in the right setting and things. And, make sure you get your reindeer urine from the right reindeer. I don't know. I mean, as well, I'm just kidding to make it lighter, but yeah, you're right, Nat. I think it's a really good point you make there.
Mm-hmm. Anyway. Okay. But the good news is we have people like you guys formulating these things and balancing them out. And I think, what gets repeated over and over again with transcriptions stuff, not to sing your praises, but I'm going to anyway, is that it's the synergies of, and I keep saying this to people, right? It's a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of that. It's 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 equals 12, not
Right.
4, right? And it's the synergy between in this built into the stack that somehow just creates a much greater, more balanced effect than you would expect from any one of these things in isolation.
At such low doses compared to what you would think. And we've talked about this with blue cannatine in the past, which I know you love. We have such little amount of things in there. I mean, we have people that it's 1 milligram of nicotine in a full troche, but in a quarter, it's a quarter milligram of nicotine. And like that will make me feel great for hours. I don't drink much caffeine. A quarter blue cannatine is fantastic for me. So, and then I'm just amazed that like I have 1/4. So in a full blue cannatine, you have 50 milligrams of caffeine, which is a quarter cup of coffee on its own, 1 milligram of nicotine, 5 milligrams of CBD, and 5 milligrams of methylene blue. So if you're taking a quarter of that, like that's such a small amount of ingredient. Like there's no studies that would say that any of that stuff's going to work on you. And none of it. But it does. And for a lot of people, we're a half of a troche. Sometimes you need a full.
I like a half.
I'm usually a quarter, sometimes a half, and then I accidentally have a full every once in a while. So
you know me, I used to do a full, right?
Because yes, I know.
I missed the memo. on cutting them off.
Yeah, you did. I remember. Yeah. So for our Trozzie, for our sleep troche, the instructions are a little bit different for this one. And because, so what we typically have is they're troches, ladies and gentlemen, for people who haven't heard me talk about them before, it's a buccal troche, which means it goes between your upper cheek and gum and dissolves over about 15 to 30 minutes. And then the reason we have buccal troches is that the nice thing about the mucosa up here is it's highly vascular, and then it directly infuses the ingredients up here. So it doesn't have to go through the body and the liver. And that's called first pass metabolism, digestion. And when you digest your supplements, they get inactivated to some degree. It could be 5%, 10%, but usually it's more like 80 or 90%. And so what the nice thing about a buccal troche is that it allows a lot of those ingredients to get directly in there before going through first pass metabolism. And so Trozzie was developed a little bit differently, actually. So what Trozzie does is it's the same thing. You start off in the buccal cavity up here, but there's one ingredient in there that actually I forgot to mention that I'll mention now. This is new to me still. I'm still working on it. It's called hanakyle, which is another one that's used very commonly for sleep. And it also works as a positive allosteric modulator of the GABA receptor, meaning that it helps the GABA receptor open more. And what hanakyle does is gives you a little bit of a spicy flavor. So, what we want people to do is have it dissolve in their mouth as a buccal troche until it gets spicy, and then you swallow the rest of it. And so we talk about it as spicing up your sleep. That's what we're going to say. So hanakyle has been around a long time. It comes from something called magnolia bark, for people that have heard of magnolia bark. And hanakyle also works on the same GABA system as other positive allosteric modulators do, like kava and like valerian root and the cannabinoids, as we were talking about before too. So you take it takes about 10 or 15 minutes up here. Once it gets a little bit spicy, just drink it with water, and then just make sure the bed's pretty close by, because you're going to feel sleepy pretty quickly. So you're not going to want to be operating any heavy machinery. You're not going to want to be driving. You're not going to want to be having a discussion with anybody that requires a lot of brain power. You're going to be shutting down. So, I'm not going to little trocom. You can take that and do a podcast, because you're going to still be activated. You're still going to be focused, but a little bit of Trozzie is not going to be that way. So we're going to have people start off with a half of a troche here for Trozzie, and then depending on how they go, up to a full. But that's going to be the dosing. Some people might need a quarter, but on our clinical testing so far with our patients and with my practice, it's about a half, depending on the induction piece. If you have a hard time with induction, like meaning you have a hard time falling asleep, then maybe a full troche is going to be better. But if you don't have as much of a time with induction, then a half may be all that you need. But make sure you have a window to sleep for at least 7 hours, 6 to 7 hours. I mean, 6 would probably be your minimum, and 7 be more ideal. 8 would be optimal when you're going to go and get it. But the idea is to not scrimp on sleep, is just to, optimize your sleep as, for your evening. So,
and we get better quality sleep and not do all the crazy things that people do just to get a night of sleep. Right. So,
I know. Yeah. And Dr. Ted has a good saying. I was just going to say that Dr. Ted has a really good saying here that I've always liked, that I like to repeat on podcasts about sleep, is that he likes to say to his patients and clients that your day starts when you go to bed, not when you wake up. And I think it's helpful for people to get that perspective. And for me, I have to remind myself too. Nobody's immune to this, with lots of things going on in their brains and time, and being pulled in different directions with kitchens and bathrooms to remodel and podcasts to run like Nat does over here.
Yeah.
I just have 4 kids to figure out, but there's that.
Which is plenty.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it is.
It's you and your wife, you're outnumbered 2 to 1. Like that's
I'm reminded
dramatic.
of this on a daily basis, please. But yeah, your day starts when you go to bed, everybody. It doesn't start when you wake up. And if you think about it that way, then you start prioritizing sleep. I mean, you and I, Nat, have great friends that are, like Molly Eastman, that have a great podcast that are all about sleep as well. And she and I will be talking about this sometime soon too. But think about it that way. I mean, you don't want to just take a supplement like this without doing all the basic things. Please.
The sleep hygiene.
Yes. But if you're in a bind, you're in a hotel, and or if you're flying and traveling, or if you're trying to get things in order, but you're still having a hard time sleeping. If there's a lot of different reasons and ways, you can use this particular compound. But I think, like, bigger picture for people today, I think Trozzie is going to be great. And I'm really excited about it. I'm always excited about Trocom and what it's been able to do. But I think big picture for people is that the GABA system is something to be acknowledged, and not only is something that's kind of like sweeping under the rug, but it's like, maybe it's something we should be thinking about more primarily, or at least as much as your serotonergic system and your dopaminergic system and your norepinephrine. Like, you can do another cold tub, but maybe you should think about GABA and chilling the fuck out too, right? So I think that's my big message for people today, is that look into this, think about it, see what's out there about the GABA system, and see what's really going on in the world of how we can think about things from a putting on the brake side of things, as opposed to just fasting ourselves from dopamine, for example, or increasing our serotonin levels. These are things that are important, but I think if you're looking at them in a silo without looking at this interneuron capacity, which is like the GABA system is bringing it all together for you. It's bringing it all together. It's modulating the whole system.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a critical piece of the equation. I myself wasn't nearly as informed an hour ago as I am now. And it is shocking a little bit how long it's taken for people to kind of go, well, wait a minute, what about that system? I mean, people talk about GABA all the time, but really bringing attention to it. And this idea of your day starts when you go to bed. Hopefully, I mean, I had this conversation with a new client yesterday who, and people beat themselves. They're like, yeah, I know, but I don't get to bed till 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I'm like, and then he's like, okay, I'm going to go to bed at 10 o'clock. I'm like, let's shoot for 11 right now. Let's see if we can make 11 work before we
something doable. Yeah.
Yeah. Just let's set
incremental goals
up for success.
Yeah. If you're like my wife, it's either one way or the other way. There's no middle ground, but for most people, it's like, it's good to have these like incremental goals, right? So
yeah. No kidding. I just think it's hard for someone who, is up till 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning to all of a sudden dial it back to 10. The problem with that is the odds of them lying there with their eyes wide open is really high. And then you've got a whole different set of problems, right?
Yes. The anxiety that kicks in and the perseverating thoughts. And when you're doing these kinds of shifts, that's when it's really nice to have these kinds of things on board, because that's how you can help shift yourself and optimize and change your sleep habits and things. And, I would be remiss also not to talk about the ways that you don't actually have to take any supplements to increase your GABA system as well, right? So how can you enhance the GABA system without supplements or compounds and things like that? There's a few very, very easy ways, actually. One of them is meditation. That we know that the more time that you stay in parasympathetic mode, the more that your GABA system is going to be activated compared to your glutamate system, which is your excitatory neurotransmitter system. So you're going to improve that balance and tip it into the GABA direction if you're meditating. And so they've talked about yoga. They've done studies with yoga and breath work specifically, and looking at how yoga and breath work and meditation can enhance the GABA system. Exercise also increases GABA, and it does this actually by various mechanisms in the brain, by just basically resetting the system, resetting the GABA and glutamate balance because you're using a lot of glutamate when you're exercising. And so it balances the system there because you're converting more to GABA as a result of that. So you get more GABA as well from that. And so those are the two major ways that you can increase GABA. Obviously, there's GABA containing foods that we talked about, but you want to be careful with those if you don't have the capacity to convert. But you can, diagnostics, right? So you can kind of do bit of a diagnostic and see.
Well, and consume the cofactors, right? Like have the B6, supplement with the B6 and the magnesium. What about DHHB?
So dihydrohanachiol beta. Yeah. So DHHB is the active form of hanachiol. So DHHB is a fantastic additional GABAergic positive allosteric modulator as well. So yes, that's the active version of hanachiol. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because that's kind of like in some of the readings I've done, try magnesium and B6. And if that doesn't work, maybe try DHHB, see if that's helpful at all.
Yeah. It can absolutely be helpful. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Do you think also, what about people? And I know that this is I know because I've gone down this wormhole and there's no really good answers. People with restless leg syndrome. And there's some thought that maybe there's a glutamate issue and a GABA issue. I mean, I think it's very complex. There's no real answers on that one.
Right.
I've seen it be pretty devastating to people. Like, do you think that there's a possibility that this stack might be helpful? I
do think so. I mean, we've gotten some reports on Trocom before, actually, but this is a much more significant GABAergic overlay on the system that we're doing with Trozzie, in the sense that we have multiple different things we're doing. We have the muscle molecule, we have the hanachiol, we have the cannabinoids. And so again, all very low dose, but I think that as a result of that, it may work. So we'll have to see. I haven't tested it in people with restless leg yet, but I think there may be a possibility there. I think a lot of it also depends on the etiology here. Sometimes it's completely what we call idiopathic, which means that there's no reason. Oftentimes, though, it's associated with vitamin, mineral, and other sort of energy metabolism things, gut health, neuropathy, things that can be addressed from that foundational side. So that's what Home Hope is all about. I know that's what your practice is all about too, to think about those things. But it can still be a really tough nut to crack for some people. But yeah, I'm really excited to kind of see where we go with this and what kind of reports we get. I mean, we're not a drug company, so we're not making any claims about any of this stuff. But we get reports of things all the time, of course, that people tell us what's helping and what's not helping. And we keep a list of all these things that we can't keep public or ever say public. But restless leg is on the list of things that, has been reported on the Trocom side. And I'm sure we'll be looking at that in clinical practice. I know I will as well, because I definitely have certain people that I'm looking to try various types of things when we make these products. And one of them, of course, is Trozzie coming up here. So yeah. Exciting. Well, I should also mention there's one piece of tech that's also been shown to help increase GABA. And this might not be surprising, transmagnetic stimulation. So TMS.
Right. Transcranial?
Transcranial magnetic, TCMS, TCMS. The transcranial magnetic stimulation. Yeah. This is a device that's approved for depression. And it's a device that's kind of it's kind of like a magnet that goes on your brain and then kind of magnetizes part of your brain. And this increases GABA as well, interestingly enough. Yeah. A little less practical for the... Not as easy to find. Yeah. You can go to a facility and you need to find a practitioner for that. It's a thing. So, all right. Well, this has been super educational, Dr. Scott. Is there anything else we need to talk about, or should we just tell people where to find you and where to find all this stuff? Let's let people know also where to learn more about Home Hope, because that's such an incredible organization. You're doing such great work. And I actually get asked a lot about certification courses from people who are wanting to get into the land of helping people with their health optimization. Yeah, thanks, Nat. I mean, it's always a pleasure speaking to you. I know we always have some great conversations, both in person, on podcast, in various locations around the world. So it's always good to hang. And health optimization medicine in practice is training doctors and practitioners around the world. And it's a 7-module certification course with some advanced practice modules. As I was describing earlier, you can check it out at homehope.org. We are actually having a conference in October. As it actually may actually come out afterwards, but we're going to be, having conferences. We're going to be having more ways of interacting with the group. We're having cohorts that are going to be going through our modules to help as well. If you're a practitioner, you're interested in finding a foundational way to approach health. We're not disease focused. We're root cause health focused, not root cause illness focused. It's a little bit different, but the idea is nothing's a zero-sum game. But the way I say it is like more of a foundational approach, setting disease and conditions aside, just focusing on the basic health of the cells, the gut, the neurotransmitters, hormones, and then you build up from there. So nothing, it doesn't take the place of functional medicine, doesn't take the place of conventional medicine for sure. It's just more of a foundational approach that we use.
It's a framework of thinking, right? It's
exactly. Yeah. So it's go to homehope.org and you can check out more information. And then our company is called Troscriptions. The letters TRO and then scriptions, like the word prescriptions. So Trokey and prescriptions mashed up into Troscriptions. Nice. And so you can find us at troscriptions.com. There's 4 docs on the team, including me. Everything's precision dosed. Everything's pharmaceutical grade. Everything is physician formulated and tested by us. And we also have practitioners that are using our products all over the world now. And we have practitioners that are having them in their office if you're interested as a practitioner and you want to sell our products in office, we'd love to have you. We are doing now, very soon, we're going to be releasing our professional line of products as well, which is very exciting. And that's our first product there is going to be a higher strength methylene blue product called Tro Plus Blue. And that's going to be 50 milligrams of methylene blue. So we're very excited about that. And so if you have interest, you can go to troscriptions.com and you can go click the practitioners link. That's where you can find information. If you sign up to be a practitioner, we have we have webinars, we have interviews. Actually, Nat and I have an interview there talking about methylene blue for urinary tract infections, which was pretty cool. Thank you for doing that, Nat. And so we have additional interviews with other practitioners all over the world doing amazing things with our products. So, and then of course you can buy them directly at troscriptions.com. You can find information on our Instagram page. We have tons of blogs. We have blogs on about all of our ingredients. So we're going to have blogs on muscimol and cordyceps, 5-HTP, melatonin, everything that we talked about here. You can find out in more detail on our website. And we'd love to hear if you guys have any questions. It's just so great to be able to bring this to you, Nat, and to your audience. And I do appreciate you and your hard work and tenacity. And even though you're from Canada, I still like you a lot.
Well, even though you're American, I still like you a lot. So thank you.
Good.
The feeling is all the feelings are mutual. So thank you so much.
Your parents do live in Boca Raton. So come on. I mean, there's that.
They do. And my brother. So,
yes.
Lion's share of my family are American at this point. So
indeed.
I get brownie points for that. So, and I've got great American friends. So all that works. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing all this today, Scott. I think we're all a little bit smarter and hopefully we'll all be a little bit calmer and better rested once all this stuff comes out. So thank you so much and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Nat.